Hello. Today we're going to look a little bit further at trend lines. Last week we learned that trend lines can be done by drawing a line through a set of points or coordinates on a graph and just making sure that there's the same amount of dots on one side of the line as there are on the other. If you'd like to, before we go through this video, you might review that video, as I'm only going to touch on the brief concept of how to draw a trend line before we move into some other concepts. So today we're going to look at scatter plots that model a linear relationship and discuss how to make predictions, solve for their slope, and solve for their y-intercept as well. If bivariate data has linear relationships, we identify the trend of the data as a positive trend or a negative trend. We've talked about this before, but just to review this a little bit, when the line is going up, like this one here on the left, I can write my name on it, which my name is Mr. Green. And if I write my name on it, you'll notice that my name is going up. Therefore, I know this is a positive trend line. If I look at this line over here and I write my name on this one, I know that this one has a negative trend because my name is going down. All we're going to be talking about today are positive and negative trend lines. We're not going to be talking about no association or no relationship. We're not going to be talking about nonlinear. We're only going to be talking about linear relationships within trend lines today. What is a trend line? A trend line is a line of best fit, or a line that represents the trend of the data, or a correlation between two variables on the scatter plot. The correlation between the two variables is x and y, and you can see that this trend line right here doesn't really go through any of the coordinates directly, but what it does do is it splits the dots relatively evenly, so there's about the same amount of dots above the line as there are below the line. How do I use a trend line to make predictions? We went over this exact problem last week, but let's talk about it again. So the way they drew this trend line is you'll notice that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 dots on top of the trend line, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4 dots below the trend line. So they did a pretty good job of drawing this trend line. And then what they want to do is make a prediction. So what it says is by looking at the trend line, we can predict that a baby that is 27 inches long is talking about height. So we then went to 27 down here on the x-axis, and we drew a line vertically up until we hit our trend line. And then we went to the left until we found the number on our y-axis, which in this case is 15. Therefore, a baby that is 27 inches in height is probably going to weigh about 15 pounds. Now that's how we would make predictions about this trend line. We could do the same thing for 24. If a baby was 24 inches tall, he's probably, or she's probably going to be about 12 pounds. That's how we use trend lines to make predictions. And we can do this whether the trend line is positive or if it's negative. Next, let's look at how do we use a trend line to find slope. In some of our past lessons, it's been quite a while, we learned how to solve slope from a graph. Now, we did this either using rise over run, or we could plug in two coordinates into y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I usually call this delta y over delta x when we solve. Now, step one is going to be to draw a trend line that follows the trend of the data series. Now, you can look here, and we already have the trend line drawn. So step one is already complete. Step two is to find 2 points on the line. When I say find 2 points on the line, I don't mean they actually have to be a point like this right here. What it could be is it could actually be something, let's say, like this dot right here. I could use this dot right here as a coordinate, and the coordinate for that would be 5, 4. So my first coordinate that I'm going to use for this equation is 5, 4. I need to find one more coordinate on this line. I could use this dot right here because this is on the line. I could also use this dot right here if I wanted to. Let's use this top dot right here. And that coordinate is going to be 1, 8. Now again, you can use any two coordinates on this line and you should get the same exact slope. If I plug 5, 4, and 1, and 8 into the y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, that will give me the slope. Now, what in the world do all those letters mean? We know that the first number is always going to be our x value, So this is my x1, and this is my x2. This 4 right here is my y1, and the 8 is my y2. So all I'm going to do is plug these numbers into the equation and solve. So the first number I'm using is y2, which would be 8 minus 4 over 1 minus 5. Now 8 minus 4 is just 4. That's an easy one to solve. And 1 minus 5 is going to be negative 4. Now 4 over negative 4 is just negative 1. Therefore, my slope is negative 1. That's how we solve for our slope on a trend line. Again, to review our steps, we draw the trend line, we find 2 points on the line, and then we use those 2 points in delta y over delta x. It's quite simple. Lastly, let's learn how to draw a trend line and find the y-intercept of that trend line. Now, we've solved for y-intercept before when we learned about slope and the equation of a line, and it's no different on a trend line. In fact, it's actually easier. So our first step is to draw a trend line that follows the trend of the data series, which we already have over here on the left. Step number 2 is estimate where the line runs into the y-axis. Now, the y-axis is always going to be the up and down vertical axis, which in this case, I'm just trying to trace with my pen. And you'll notice that it runs into 2 different dots here, but I don't care about those 2 dots because neither of them are where my trend line runs into the y-axis. The trend line runs into the axis at approximately, looks about 9. So my y-intercept would just be 9, because that's where the line runs into the y-axis, and it intersects right about there. So to find the y-intercept, to review, all I do is draw the trend line and then find out where does it run into the y-axis or intersect with the y-axis. Hopefully these lessons were helpful in learning how to draw the trend line, find the slope, and find the y-intercept. If you need a review on solving for slope or solving for y-intercept, there are other videos in my channel that will help you with that as well.